Siamo già collegati? Perfetto, buon pomeriggio a tutti. Devo dire, abbiamo avuto appena un buffet molto, molto piacevole e adesso ricominciamo subito con questo seminario di Paolo Benigno, che ringrazio moltissimo e ci tengo anche a ringraziare ancora Marco Leonardi per essere venuto qui con noi in questa giornata di presentazione del rapporto. Questo seminario oggi pomeriggio affronta il tema del titolo, quindi le cryptocurrencies. Non mi dilungo e do la parola a Paolo Benigno, che ringrazio. Sapete che Paolo ha scritto molto su questo, quindi basta, immagino, andare sul suo sito e ci sono tutti i suoi papers. Paolo, grazie mille. A te il floor. Sorry. This is in English. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry, guys. So this is in English. Okay.
Okay. So why is in English? Okay. Thank you very much. And so let me think about this topic on cryptocurrency and whether this is a challenge for a central bank. This is moving in the right way. The PowerPoint is not animated, but this is animated. So Bitcoin, so there are some facts which are important. So the first one is that Bitcoin was born in 2009, so as the first digital currency. Second fact, we are moving towards online channels for distribution and of goods and services. So everyone is making more purchases through online services. Then the third fact.
Sì, ma c'è lavoro.
Some noises.
Giro.
So you have to put mute online, I think.
Please, mute all and online, please mute all, okay?
Okay, so Bitcoin, distribution online, and then third, there are some highly concentrated platforms, Amazon, Google, Facebook, that basically intermediate transaction between agents across any border. And those platforms are very important and are built on network externality, okay? So that's the third fact. And basically, what is interesting is that now goods and services are global markets, and they're really crossing any borders and across various jurisdictions. Okay, so I guess there should be someone online that we hear. You can mute, please. Okay. All right. So let me first answer to three questions. Are cryptocurrency really currency? Are money? Are bubbles? Okay? So currency, yes, they are well-identified currency. How does it come? Well, there is this cryptographic guarantee. So basically, this informatic mathematics system allow to identify exactly what a Bitcoin is. Okay, so this is very important because even through the distributed ledger technology, the identification of what is a Bitcoin avoids duplications. So there is no double spending. So you can have something digital which is unique and identifiable. Okay, so that's the great innovation in the Bitcoin world and the cryptocurrency world. Something that before was not possible. So what is the difference here? And I think this is a philosophical difference, which I want to stress a lot. So in the real world, in our world, in the traditional monetary system, what certify the trust is a bank, right? So We live, so we live in a world which is basically paper guarantee, as opposed to cryptographic guarantee. What does it mean, paper guarantee? Is a word in which there is some contract on paper, and then there is some possibility of legal enforcement. When we move to cryptographic guarantees, this is a word in which is the cryptography is giving you the guarantee, and it's based on mathematics. So this distinction I borrow from this guy Nazarov, who is a sort of genius, is a founder of Chainlink, with a cryptocurrency. And the interesting difference is that paper guarantee word is a probabilistic word, while cryptographic guarantee is a deterministic. What does it mean? It means if I have a problem in our monetary system, the enforcement comes through the legal process. And legal process has to do with judge. And judge take subjective evaluation, right? Never objective. The cryptographic guarantee is objective. It's going to be an algorithm. It's going to be a solution to problems. It's mathematical. So deterministic. So if I enter a contract on a blockchain, that contract, when it's enforced, is enforced by mathematics. Okay? So that's a big difference, which actually, give you the power of this new world, because you move out from something which is on based on judge subjectiveness. And they're currency because they're used. The fact that you avoid double spending, so it's not just something you identify, but you can use and use as a medium of exchange. Our money. So money is a bit different concept with respect to currency. And indeed, it's very difficult to define what is money. So Hayek was saying money is not an object, not even un. It would be more helpful for the explanation of monetary phenomena if money were an adjective. So money is described by the property that money has, okay? So nowadays, we don't distinguish even between private and public money, right? Because we have banknotes, obviously it's money, but even deposit are money. Why? Because they provide some services. So they have some property. So money is something that has some properties, okay? And the properties are usually unit of account, medium of exchange, store of value. So you always hear some, even economists saying, oh, Bitcoins are not money or not anything. Some of them call them shitcoin, right? So no, they are currency, they are money. Why? Because the unit of account, well, Bitcoin is well identified as a unit of account. Now, some people may say, oh, but prices are denominated in euro, in dollars. Doesn't matter much for being really a currency. It could be a property of money. Medium of exchange, well, they're used. Anyway, they're used because people use Bitcoins to buy something, okay? Use other cryptocurrency for other purpose. Store of value, well, it's a bit trickier to define what is a store of value. Some people say, okay, but the store of value is what? In terms of goods, of the price of the goods that you can purchase? Well, that's a different concept. Your store of value means that the Bitcoin, to me, remains unaltered across time. It's always a Bitcoin. So if you invest in that, I always have a Bitcoin. Like when you have in cash. For me, that's the store of value, okay? Other people usually, attribute the store of value as the property of money to maintain purchasing power. That has to do with inflation, which is something different. Okay, but in general, I would think cryptocurrency are currency, are money.
Unlike other currencies, they don't generate money. Oh, excuse me.
We need the mic. Let's leave the question to the end, okay? Let's leave the question to the end.
Are bubbles? So that's usually the big question, because we see these prices were very volatile, going from $10,000 to $60,000, now back to normal. Yeah, they could be driven by bubbly movements. It's not a problem. But I argue that they do have a fundamental component. So, and in general, any security can have a bubble component, okay? It's not just the Bitcoin. So there is there, I guess. There has been some bubble there, but sure, but they have a fundamental component. What is the fundamental component? The intrinsic value. In a sense, when you use something for transaction, it provides you some liquidity. For example, I use Bitcoin for illegal purpose, okay? On the web. That's for me is a value for that, okay? So that is a fundamental value, for example. And basically, on the chains, those coins are used to incentivize, proof of work, for example, to incentivize computations, or eventually oracles, which is when you try to get some information off chains and you put on the chains. And then you remunerate people, with coins. So there is an intrinsic value. Okay, so that's important. There is a fundamental value. It's not zero. So, and I argue that most importantly, rarely people think about this, but they do have a monetary policy, which is a fundamental properties for giving a value to money. So what is the monetary policy for a Bitcoin? Do they have a central bank? No, but these guys were so smart to put the monetary policy. What is the monetary policy? Someone knows? Fixed supply. So that's important. They say this is going to reach 21 million of Bitcoins in certain time with certain procedure, with a certain algorithm. That's a money supply. And we know that that could be a fundamental. Now, this is like a bit of cheating graph, that's explaining it's working. It was a graph that works well, but let me tell you what I have there. I have in blue line is the US dollar to Bitcoin exchange rate. So you see, I bought 10 Bitcoins here. Impossible. I wouldn't be here. I would be in another country. Okay, so store of value. They maintain a store of value. You can see. There is a lot of purchasing power you can make with Bitcoin over time. Now that's the price. So you see the bubbles, like in the bubbles in the 2017. Then there has been another one, and then the last one, right?
Sorry, just a quick question, because I'm still troubled by the fact that you said that the Bitcoin has its store of value. Then if it's so, any financial assets, equities are money?
No, equity doesn't provide you store of value, because if equity lose, you are not guaranteed to receive €1 in time. But the Bitcoin today is a Bitcoin tomorrow. So in this way, for me, is a store of value.
Even if its value goes to zero?
If its value go completely to zero, it wouldn't be, right? Yes.
So to enhance credibility, we have changed our policy, and questions are allowed during the seminar, but please, clarification questions. So, did you have a question?
Thank you. The remark was that unlike other currencies, they don't generate interest. So
they do now.
Do they?
They have a staking. You do staking, and they give you some interest rate on those. Bitcoin, no, but Ethereum does. And what else? Tezos, I know that. Give me some 5% a year. So they give you, and I may understand how this work. So what is the orange line? Is the M, which is the supply of dollars, which is M1, I think I got, and M star is the divided. So the ratio between the supply of dollars, M1, aggregate, I think it's M1 or M0, it could be M0, divided the supply of Bitcoin. So obviously Bitcoin started from zero in 2009, and they have a money supply that goes like, amp-shaped, sort of, right? Bell. So So they increase a lot at the beginning. So you basically, I wouldn't imagine this, but the money supply, you see on the right-hand side, one, right? The money supply in Bitcoin increased by more than the money supply M0 in US dollar, okay? So at the beginning, so the ratio was going down. If I normalize the beginning by one, okay? But you can see that with the latest financial crisis, things have changed, okay? Basically, money supply in United States has increased by far with respect to the supply of coins in Bitcoins. And if you think for the future, you know, eventually money supply in United States is going to increase, while that of Bitcoin is going to be stable at 21 million. So basically, the relative money supply implies that the Bitcoin should appreciate over time. At least this is a fundamental that we study in economics, okay? So beside all the other facts, so this is a fundamental. So a coin which is not diffuse as other and is used should appreciate over time. And it's not a surprise. So this graph even say that the relative ratio is quite going well with the bubble, but again, it's a bit of a cheating there, so you know, don't take it seriously, okay? But just to tell you that there is a monetary policy there. Now, what is the innovation about crypto to payment system? They are not necessary for online payments. Yeah, before 2009, there was online market, so we didn't need the crypto. Why? Because they're not the only form of digital money. Okay, so credit cards, PayPal, you could use them. They are not even efficient and eco-friendly means of payment. So in a second, you can do 3 to 7 transactions with Bitcoin. Visa does much more, okay? These are people who say, oh, look at this. Well, this is the current state. Like when they invented the engine, this was not like our engine today. So that's something that's going to improve. Okay, it doesn't mean that this is to waste this business, because you know it's going to improve. Technology is going to move. They are not even a stable means of payments. What that means? Well, you know, they're volatile. So when I make payments, I would like to have some stability, right? From one day to another, not a variation of 5–10% perhaps, right? But there are stable coins. People invented stable coins. Stable coins are basically, they are supposed to be stable. Okay, means that Terra was supposed to mimic exactly the US dollar, right? How do they do? How they should do? You know, once I issue Tether, I should have enough dollars on the other side. That's a stable coin. Why they do stable coins if we have dollars? Yeah, because those are things, they have some value in transactions. And so you get money out there. So it's a great business. Theoretically, are stable coins. But also in practically, now there are some methods that are called proof of reserves that allow to customers in some way, to people on the market, to understand whether a coin has some reserves there. Okay, so to give this information. I'm going to go back to this kind of information. Now, what is the innovation? Differently from the other form of digital money, they are digital cash. So they maintain the same privacy as cash, almost. So credit cards don't have that privacy. You know, there is a third party. They are knowing, you know, what you have done. The innovation is that this is cash. This is like I pay with the banknotes over the internet. And me and only the seller or the buyer knows about it, not other person. Okay? So some people value privacy, maybe for non-legal purpose, but some people value that even for legal purpose, right? Okay?
Pierpaolo, but theoretically you can go on the blockchain and see everything, right?
Yeah,
I mean, the
but
FBI can do that, right?
yeah, but the system is not. There is also the possibility that you can have majority over the nodes of the blockchain in a way to control the blockchain. But the system is not intended for that, in a sense. It's actually for privacy, so they won't do that at the end of the day. So there is a value for privacy, I think. So they maintain the same privacy. And this, I think, is the innovation. Plus, they are a different currency. When I buy in Bitcoin, I buy in Bitcoin. I don't buy in euro, okay? So it's a different thing. Although it would say, okay, I'm just making a purchase. And this is tremendously, in my view, changing the monetary system. Okay, so let me tell you what is the challenge that I think is there. The challenge comes from the combination from two things. Online market, there are all these online market of goods and services, highly concentrated platform, Amazon, Facebook, and digital currency. Plus, the money market provide you incommensurable rents, profits. That's why the government want to keep the monopoly of money. Okay? Seigniorage, Since the old time, money has attracted the power. Okay? And I would like to go back to this point. So there is a lot of power there. And then there are now these online markets, a cross-borders platform. Now, the challenge is that, as it was happening, a large player with high market power, like Facebook, could introduce a global currency on its network. So millions of users across the world that they use the same currency and could become immediately liquid. So this project, I think, was the one that persuaded government to start to think about having their own digital currency. Okay, so, and I'm explaining you why it's maybe a problem for the government and why it's instead of a benefit for us. So the World Wide Web can have a worldwide currency, or many. And if you think from a philosophical perspective, you're right. We are now connected with respect to the world, right? And, we have this barrier, these borders, national borders. Some of the borders are already more relaxed, right, after the pandemic, because, sometimes you can have a job and work remotely, maybe from one country to another country, right? So that's already interesting in terms of mobility. So we have integrated goods market in some way, and services, and then we could have a worldwide currency. And even a market of financial securities. And everything is going to be based on what? On these cryptographic encryptions, guarantees. Something which has a different guarantees than the paper guarantee that we live in our world. Okay? No more judge, just mathematics telling you whether this contract has to be fulfilled, enforced, and everything. So that's where the blockchain evolution is going. If you've heard about decentralized finance, right? So there is now a word which is called Web 3.0. So there was Web 1.0, the standard web. 2.0 is the hub. And 3.0 is everything on these blockchains. Now, why? What is the failure? Why this is better, I think, than our world? What central banks do? And nowadays, they do a lot of things, okay? First, they try to maintain the stability of the value of money, price stability. We have discovered this morning that they don't succeed much, right? Okay, so that's a problem, and I faced this problem. It's a big problem because I know, what are you thinking? You say, well, but there is also financial stability. They safeguard the system because they do this lender of last resort function, okay? So there are banks, and we learn about Diamond Dybbuk model, in honor of the Nobel Prize, right, of this year, that banks are fragile, they're subject to bank runs, and then you need, I don't know whether, but this is this has to be evaluated. You need a central bank to be there and eliminate these bank runs. Not necessary. They stabilize fluctuation in the economy, right? We see if there is a recession, the lower interest rate, and those things like that. I'm not sure these are all legitimate objective of the central bank, but what is important, and we realize this, which is, again, going back to the power of money, is that this objective exposes the central banks to interact with private sector, intermediaries, and treasury. And those interactions usually leads to condition of financial and fiscal dominance. What does it mean? It means that we discussed that over lunch, right? Why the ECB can rise interest rate? Oh, but not that much, because then it's going to have problems. Then banks are going to have problems. Then the Treasury Italian government is going to have problems. But what is the problem? The problem is that on the first step, you gave this possibility. And they take your hand and your arm, right? So that's the problem. That in this interaction, which are not necessarily legitimate, then monetary policies start to become subordinate. So we have an history and we have experience before the financial crisis, 2007, 2008, that the private sector created quasi-money, like this sort of mortgage-backed securities. They were believed to be liquid, they were believed to be safe. And then what happened? And then they were rescued by the central banks, okay? And if you go back in the history, before were deposit, before were goldsmith, before were banknotes, before were everything. So the private sector is always has this incentive. Why? Because the central bank in some way allow the private sector to create deposits. But why the deposits should be safe? Only central bank liabilities are safe. Deposits should be safe if the bank is appropriately capitalized or has appropriate asset to back those deposits, not because then there is the guarantee of the central bank, because this guarantee will start implicitly make this bank in a moral hazard situation to create the condition for which they're going to be rescued. The Treasury have also incentive to overborrow, historically. It's good. They just get money from the bank. PNNR, that's another example of money from Europe. Yeah, that's good money. Why we don't have to get this money? It's cheaper because we're borrowing at lower rates with respect to what Italy is borrowing. But those lower rates, how do they come? Because of financial institution, because maybe even there the ECB will eventually consider that debt better debt than other debt, right? It's very tricky. So it seems there is no borrowing constraint for those agents. And eventually they come conflict. Well, we cannot raise interest rate to maintain price stability because that's going to jeopardize the objective of financial stability. And you see from all these, press conference by Lagarde, it's a bit embarrassing. Sometimes say we are not here to close the spread. Yes, we are here to close the spread. We are not back to close the spread, right? That's the question. The problem is that basically they shouldn't be there to close the spread. Treasury is one agent in the economy that should be subject to solvency constraint. Envisioning the future. So this you have to report to Paolo on offering, because I told him, this is what you need to. So what I think is going to be the future. So in the same way as market of goods and service are no longer identifiable with national jurisdiction, financial and money markets may no longer be identifiable with national jurisdiction. We may have worldwide currency, worldwide financial markets, running in a trustless way. Trustless means it is decentralized blockchain way. Through the blockchain, the process of verification comes not because there is a third party say, oh, this is good or not, but this is all this computer running and evaluating. So this is the trustless way through cryptographic guarantee. What does it mean? The new monetary and financial system may or may not have this conflict between stability, stabilization. Maybe not. I will tell you a bit more now. But people may choose the monetary system in which to make their transaction, to live, to receive the remuneration and pay taxes. What I mean, that in the future, I would like to belong, I'm Swiss franc. So I choose Swiss franc, okay? So I work in Switzerland. And there are benefits of that. I can tell you, inflation is lower, no problem of fiscal problems, appreciation of the currency. So when I see this, I say, oh, I was lucky, to move to Switzerland. But then everyone should, this should be a possibility for everyone. Everyone can go to its own system. I would like to live in a system with zero inflation. So there will be a currency for that. And maybe that's the currency which is going to be much more adopted by all the people. So what I mean, they don't want to be a euro. They won't be Swiss franc. There will be private currency and people staying on this currency system. So global system, which don't have any more borders, and in which, contracts are going to be enforced through cryptographic. Okay? So, think about this. It's not, and this project about euro is gone. So this is going to be, the private are going to decide on which area I want to belong, across any border. And I can have, eventually, my stipend being in Bitcoin, eventually. And the monetary policy governance could take a different form. So what is the problem of the current monetary governance is in the tension that we have between this financial stability, fiscal dominance, and price stability. And we see that, right? And many times people say, oh, but why they let Lehman Brothers failing and not the other? Why they do quantitative easing? So why do I want to live in a country in which they do quantitative easing to help some country to run a deficit forever, right? Right? That's not. So it's going to be a world in which policy is going to be explicited in form of state contingent, eventually state contingent commitments. And those are enforced mathematically. No. Lorenzo.
Just a quick comment on that. Don't you think that there are tension even in the private market? If I am a firm and I'm insuring this cryptocurrency payment, could I be incentivized to change the rule that are fixed to make profit of that? So that could be that creates some lack of credibility in these networks that provide these forms of payments. Obviously, this problem of credibility is still in central banking, as you mentioned, but there could be in the future also for the private sector.
It could be, but I envision that there could be competition on those products. And competition such that the better system is going to emerge. The people are going to trust the system and have a process all decentralized and run in a trusted and trustless way. So, as for example, Terra cases and all the other recent scandals, you know, they're testimony of that. But those are good because they clean out, right? And the good project remains. So I believe then people are going to understand the good project. Now, it's possible that in the future, and people are working on that, the more and more information from outside on the real world is going to go onto blockchains. So at the beginning, you know, the first blockchain was basically verifying transaction on Bitcoins. So that's the only information they had. So everything which is out of the blockchain, Bitcoin, is contaminating the Bitcoin because the information on Bitcoins is all proved in this decentralized way. You know, this node, chains, computer verifying. But then when you come on the blockchain and you say, oh, the price of gold, now let's do a contract on the blockchain. You have to put some information outside of the blockchain and enforce the contract. So the price of gold is 2,000. And then the blockchain is, how can I verify that? Is it different? You know, you start from decentralized system and then you have something from outside and you put some information which is not as legitimate as the original information. So this is the oracle problem. How you make the information outside the blockchain of the same purity as the information on the blockchain. And they are working on that. But in general, in the future, you're going to have a system in which a lot of information is going to go to the blockchain, to users, in a way that if I deposit things on some bank, perhaps on the blockchain, I will have also exact information on the assets that that bank has. And I can evaluate the solvency of that bank. There's not going to be an audit system. There's going to be a rating system. There's going to be all this information available to everyone because they can collect this information. Okay, so it's a completely different world in which eventually, you know, you don't need even supervision of bank. You know, if I'm going to put something on that bank, I'm going to have certain solvency rate or not, because it has certain securities, right? All this problem of information, they may be solved, you know, by spreading information for all users. Now, why is it risky? So when is a currency becoming irrelevant? So when the euro, the dollar may disappear, when no one is using them, okay? There is always a caveat, and that's the power of a government is to enforce a currency on certain use, which make them like used, you know, for example, for taxes, right? But I learned, you know, in Lugano, they were thinking to pay taxes in Bitcoin, right? You know, in the city of Lugano. So, you know, not all the government are so, you know, strict. So, for example, suppose right now that instead of being on the euro, we are on a Bitcoin system. What would it change? Monetary policy is run with constant money supply. That's the monetary policy. I know what this is. It's a completely rule-based monetary policy. Consistent with price stability? In general, theoretically, yes. Money supply constant should deliver price stability. You know, it's not inconsistent, okay? That's the argument for models to have price stability, have money supply constant.
Paolo, just on this, gold was in limited supply.
Limited supply.
And the gold standard failed.
Because the market created, because of the issue of the banks, of creation of quasi-money.
This wouldn't be possible with
Would be
cryptocurrency?
possible, yeah, but it's going to go back to what I was answering before. That quasi-money is not necessarily considered Bitcoins, you know, completely safe if that money is not backed by good securities. Now, in the standard system, we don't have information of who is creating the good or bad money. And then you have also deposits, which are guaranteed by the government. And so the banks create even more money, right? So, in those systems, there is an excessive creation of what is called quasi-money, which is money that pretend to be safe, but at the end of the day is not. So you want to have the information on which money is safe or not. For example, Terra could be safe dollar, but they are not, because they're not providing dollar for each Terra that they issue, right? So that's unbacked, right?
You say that banks don't have a productive role in the economy. I mean,
They
that
have, but not necessarily.
Let me say,
Yeah.
that quasi-money is credit.
That's the liability. Quasi-money are the liability of the bank. The credit that they offer is based on those liability. But if I produce and I'm in the system to lend, I should get,
Bitcoin.
well, I will lend, suppose in Bitcoin, but then I borrow in Bitcoin, but at the risk which is appropriate for the lending that I do. It's not a problem. So why the fact that that's the problem of the centralizing money and credit market. So Friedman was saying, let's have a narrow banking regime. And then I'm going to go back to this. Narrow banking regime means separate money and credit market. So whoever gives credit to the economy is not necessarily producing deposits which are used as money. No, those are completely separate. They provide credit with their risk, with their evaluation, right? And then I have the money market, which is of the people that create money, which is completely safe. And Friedman was saying, let's have the government to supply all the liquidity in the economy that it needs, which is actually the central bank digital currency project. So you see that, I will go back. So how these things are changing, are pushing the central bank to take ownership on the full issuance of money, which now is a bit government and a bit financial, which means that this financial sector then is rescued if it's failed. But if the game is correct, and I say, I issue the money, then I don't save you anymore. And indeed, with Bitcoin, there is no lender of last resort. It's a good or a bad thing? Yeah, we usually think, wow, how is it going to come if there is a financial crisis? Well, maybe this is going to stop creation of financial crisis, because then people say, I'm taking the risk of the responsibility of what I do. You see, so complete separation from the financials is a stream model, okay? Then, even more important, there is no seigniorage. There is no unconventional policy. No interaction with the Treasury. And then the Treasury has to come up with the resources. They want to do the PNNR, yeah, they do this PNNR with their own resources and taxes. It's not that they, and the solvency of the Treasury, is based on the taxes that they levy. Not eventually on the central bank buying, when I heard about the TPI, right? I don't want to live in a world in which there is the TPI, because they tell me it's the transmission protection no, it's not. That's the protection for some countries, right? That's the TPI. Do you want to live there? No. So this is a different world, right? It's a different monetary system in which there is no interaction with the Treasury, no interaction with the financial sector. Eventually, the system, but the system has been created on rule, mathematic rule. I don't expect that Bitcoin are going to change the supply of money for some reason, right? The system is going to be invariant to this, right? So there will be conflict. Well, the conflict will be solved in a different way, not by monetary policy. In the past, when there was you know, the bank runs occurring in the banking area or everything needed a central bank, right? So the central bank started not because of stabilizing the economy, but in the US it started because they had to stabilize the system from financial crisis. But the problem was, I guess, was not that you needed a central bank for that, was that the private sector was unable to create good credit, okay? So you need to do screening, right? So what happened before the 2008 financial crisis? You've seen from movies, right? They just were giving mortgage to everyone. Oh, yes, I just pay someone else, right? And then at the end of the day, who paid that? Right? People with taxes or whatever. Or today maybe with inflation, right? So there is no free lunch. So I think this is going to be, there's going to be a system in which we are going to live and choose to live. You know, I may living physically in some place, but live on a different monetary system, which is going to be protected from financial and fiscal dominance. And eventually this is going to shrink the importance of the fiscal sector, which is very important. Today, Marco was talking, and every slide that I was observing has a lot of P, which is my first name, P, piano, planification. It's like we live in a world in which you have to planify. You have someone planning, right? Central, right? And eventually, you know, when there is no this interference, you would have the fiscal authority, which is going to do a limited job, right? So there's going to be more information flowing on the blockchain, which, for example, I was telling you, is going to evaluate intermediary asset, this kind of proof of reserve, without any need of audit, financial supervision, or central bank guarantee. Okay. So basically, and that's the right word, denationalized monetary system. It's not a supranational, because supranational means that there is something to do with the nation. Here is completely out of nation, out of any border, creating a denationalized monetary system, which is going to be reliable, immutable, and with commitments. Commitments not necessarily rule, they can be state contingent commitments that are mathematically enforced. A system based on the faith in mathematics, which does not fool people, rather than based on the faith on institution, which do fool people all the time. Okay? You write a Maastricht Treaty, you may like or may not like. They say no monetary financing, and then tell me, how do you call unconventional policy? This type of unconventional policy is not monetary financing. It's not on the primary market, it's just out there, right? And I don't think I'm saying something outrageous. So that's the system. You know, you write the rule and then, oh, forget. And this is the history. You know, you always fool people in some way. And some people may not like this. You know, so I want to live in a system in which I know what it is. Okay? So you can have it now in a mathematically enforced way. Moving from a system of legal guarantee to a system of cryptographic guarantee. So that's really the revolution, I think. And here, going back to Lorenzo, you know, there can be several currencies. I can go to a good currency. There can be bad currency there, but we can, you know, I think good currency is going to prevail because they are going to show the benefits of that. I can tell you, you know, living in a 10%, 12% inflation world may not be good for me. You know, and I see central bank is not doing that, and we were saying, oh, they don't do because then it's going to happen something to the debt, Italian debt. Oh, you know, why should I care about that? If a German, why should I care about the Italian debt? I would like to live in a 2% world, because if you think decisions are really different. So now, you know, I have to take a decision. I have to think about, well, is going to be inflation in 2 years? It's going to be 6, 2, 3. If you live in a world in which there is stability on inflation, then it's easier. You don't have even to think about it. It's not a problem, right? And we can choose the system where to live. Reaction of central bank. Immediate. So 91% of 81 central banks are studying the problem in 2021. So they're thinking about digital currency. They want to defend their position, rents, and their own existence. Because if their currency is not used, they're gone. There is no euro if you don't use the euro, okay? There is no central bank there anymore. And they have started to produce some currency at the retail market. What is central bank digital currency? So it means providing their own digital cash that could be directly used for online payment with a similar system to the blockchain distributed ledger technology. So this digital cash is going to be central bank liabilities. Now, when you think about the liabilities of the central bank, you have banknotes, and you have something which is already digital, is reserve. So having digital liability is not a new thing, because the reserve of the central bank that are used between commercial bank and transaction, those are already digital form, but they're obviously used, they're not available at the retail sector. So now what you're going to do, you're going to allow the public to have something of your liability. So that's the innovation. But, as I say, digital money is not something new, because I use deposit. You know, when I charge my credit card for online transaction, I'm using deposit. So the novelty is exactly substituting the deposit at the bank for deposit at the central bank, basically, with the issue that the central bank money is always free of any risk. That's the key aspect. Deposit, no. That's the power of central bank. Central bank liability in a fiat money currency system are always repaid. There is no way the central bank can go bankrupt. That's different. It's not bankrupt in a sense that dollar maintains the dollar value. The dollar. In value in terms of goods is another thing. That's one objective of the central bank. Now, what does it mean? It means that digital money is moving from commercial bank to the central bank with a project of central bank digital currency. And that's a better alternative. If I were to put my money at some bank in Italy, or I can put my money at the central bank, it's better to put at the central bank, right? To keep it there. Because it's safer. They have a balance sheet, but they don't have to have any balance sheet, central banks. So it means that the commercial bank, as you say, the system, is going to lose the way of funding the project in a cheaper way, which is moving to the narrow banking regime. So you see that when you start to see the competition of better money outside, then this government money has to be a better money. So it means that the system having some way to cope with the fact that you want to get rid of deposit as a digital money. And it's going to be central bank money at all. So banks are going to pay higher cost of borrowing. They don't have any more safe deposits there, right? Because everyone moves on the central bank. So they're going to charge more. So there is going to be a sort of process of higher interest rate eventually in lending rate in the banking sector, because they don't benefit anymore of this benefit, which was a cost also for us. So the benefit comes with a cost, because the banks make a lot of problem at the end of the day, right? And the government saved the bank, right? So the financial dominance. So we get rid a bit of financial dominance with some cost for the system. And the lending activity could shrink. You know, there could be a process of disintermediation. Not necessarily this is going to produce more or less risk-taking. If I know I have to square my budget, maybe I take less risk. On the other side, you say, oh, I want to make more profits, I take more risk, right? You know. But I would prefer the first way, you know. Now that I have to be more responsible, I'm trying to screen more, you know, the firm toward which I'm lending. And there could be issues about financial stability, bank runs. But those maybe why the central bank shouldn't care about that. There should be the government caring to guarantee or making transfer, like they did in after the 2007-8 crisis, right? It's not the central bank necessary to cope with this cost. Benefits. So what are the benefits of having a central bank digital currency? What I'm saying is this is going to represent the evolution toward a narrow banking regime in which credit and liquidity markets are separated, with all the supply of liquidity in the hands of the central bank. So no longer the supply of liquidity comes in from the credit sector, from the bank sector, which is the idea Friedman had. Now, there is another possibility that you can remunerate the deposit at your central bank with an interest rate, can be positive and negative. So in period in which you need to overcome the zero lower bound, you can also lower interest rate on reserves and on deposits at the central bank in a way to overcome the interest rate, the zero lower bound constraints. Cost. It's not clear that the central bank will bring efficient in the payment system. So one of the motive that they say is, oh, the payment system internationally has still a lot of inefficiency because there are monopoly there. And then why the central bank should be there and get competition, right? They would like to get rents also. So they will not eliminate all the inefficiency in the payment system. It's not clear to me they will bring the same privacy as a cryptocurrency. So why? So if I think I want to do some transaction on the internet, why do I want to do it through the central bank rather than doing through a system which is of decentralized trust? Maybe I would like to have privacy through the system. And the big cost is that if this project fails, it's going to be the failure completely of the government currency. So suppose they start to go into the business of digital money and then people don't use that. So that is going to be completely disanchor of the monetary system. So it's a big cost of reputation. So let me conclude. So conclude with some views on what I, recapitulate what I said from great authors. Hayek. So for what I told you, today, and I think I say something very outrageous to most of you, but there is a reason. So I was saying that I'm deeply convinced that the main task of a theoretical economist, and I think I'm there, or a political philosopher, I'm not, should be to intervene on public opinion to make what is politically impossible today politically plausible. Consequently, the objection that my proposals are currently unworkable does not dissuade me from developing them. This is in the preface to the edition of the Denationalization of Money, which is exactly, it's a sort of visionary book in which he thinks about moving to a world in which there are no government currency. And, you know, all these proponents of this digital currency, they some way started from this idea, so from a philosophical perspective. And the reason why you want to do that is because you don't want to give money to the government, because that's a monopoly. And the monopoly has always incentive to prevent discovery of better methods that would not give any more power to the monopoly, right? And so the government money always try to keep them on their own since history. Why? Because there are rents there, and money can be manipulated a lot. What the government should do, and you know, this is going back to PNR. So my view on PNR, you know, when you hear about this plan, which is, oh, we have to move to the transition ecological versus technological, but then the implementation is very poor in that respect, let me say. The government should be completely discharged from any duty, actually, you know, should be limited. Because they're always exposed to innumerable delusions, because they don't have knowledge enough. So the knowledge comes from the interaction in the private sector, entrepreneurship, all these things. They are knowledgeable of, you know, where did it come, this digital currency? It came from private sector. So they're able to make innovation, right? They're able to direct things. The government doesn't have this idea, because there's always the idea of, you know, it is a centralized view of the world, which is reminiscent of Soviet Union, communism, all this stuff. It doesn't produce good things at the end of the day. It's true that the market in which people operate sometimes has failure, but it's always try to produce better things, and I think better things for society, which the government doesn't have. So it doesn't have the duty of superintending the industry of private people and of directing it toward the employment most suitable to the interests of society, because it means that they have the knowledge to know where to go, right? So it's better to let the people to freely act and choose the way best for their own interests, as Adam Smith was saying, which are also the interests of society. Thank you very much.
Paolo, thank you so much. Let's take 10 minutes for questions. I will start. I have actually 3 questions. So first of all, actually, thank you so much for a very passionate and thought-provoking presentation. I think now I understand why you moved to Switzerland first. And second, this is a question, a serious question. You sound like, you know, a kind of a crypto guru. You sound a little bit like a crypto guru. So I'm just wondering whether you have any conflict of interest to reveal or not.
How do you know that?
No, I don't. I know nothing.
You don't know anything.
I know, but in case it would be good to.
I have a big, may become a big conflict of interest.
Okay.
In 6 months.
Okay. No, okay.
That will be shaking the financial market.
Okay, let's talk about this later.
We will meet in another country then. Safer than even Switzerland.
Anyway, let me go to my 3 questions. So question number 1, I'll start from the easy one and then go up to the difficult one. So the first one is seniorage. Who gets it? And I think here there should be a scheme where this is kind of redistributed to the owners of the currency. But I'm not sure there's already something like that, you know, organized and
sort of staking.
Okay, so that's the first question. The second, let me come back to the gold as being limited supply, because you know when the economy grows, one of the problems during the gold standard was that the need of liquidity was growing, and there was not enough growth in gold to meet this growing liquidity. So this might be a problem also for cryptocurrency. And the third question, which I think is the point where I am further from your interpretation, is whether cryptocurrency have value or not. Because, legal tenders have a value because government are able to impose a value to the legal tenders through, for example, forcing you to pay taxes in that legal tender, through controlling inflation. Now, it is true that not all governments are able to do that. For example, Argentina, just to mention, a very popular country these days, has not been able to. But if you take the United States, why you should not trust the US dollar in terms of having a value, while Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency does not have, a government able to give a value to the currency, and hence there is an equilibrium where the currency has a value of 0 if you eliminate the illegal transaction that, of course, have a transaction value for certain people, but and so that's my main issue, and that I think is at the core of the volatility of these cryptocurrencies, that they are not well anchored, their value is not well anchored. So these are my 3 questions. Let's collect all the questions that, if there is any question from the audience online, you should unmute yourself, introduce yourself, and ask the question.
So I was asking before, but then I was answering. I just want you to confirm, because you said that there will still be banks, but the way you describe them, they're not banks, they are sort of mutual funds. So they don't create deposits, therefore they don't create money, they need to collect funds and lend. So they would be a sort of mutual funds. So if I'm a saver and I want to, okay, because you said, the answer is that cryptocurrency can pay an interest, so that would be the equivalent of a deposit. Okay, I answered myself. No, the second question is, maybe it's a marginal issue, but we know that there is a big problem with Bitcoins and any cryptocurrency that, they are based on solving mathematical puzzles, but they take up a lot of energy. And, the other way, which is not a proof of work, is a proof of stake, has lots of problems. Are there development there? Is there a solution to have Bitcoins without consuming all the energy in the world?
Please.
I'm gonna build up on that question. We mentioned about the Bitcoins, and you mentioned about living in a world with Bitcoin, and I think that as well, I was mentioning that the early miners has a competitive advantage in mining Bitcoin, so they were able to build up a big reserve of Bitcoin at low cost. Is that kind of mining the decentralization that is at the core of Bitcoin system, in your opinion? Thank you.
Please.
And do you think we are ever going to reach a point where some bigger countries are going to test the Bitcoin standard, or as El Salvador is doing, and maybe you know of any other country who is exploring that type of solution?
Other questions? Please.
Yeah, concerning narrow banking, an increase in the interest rate imposed by the banks if they just start lending would basically imply maybe credit rationing, because as we know from Stiglitz and Weiss, only the bad borrower will be queuing to get these loans. And the second question is linked to what Professor Foni was saying. If we take away resources from governments, we basically prevent them from redistributing, and then the question is whether in this Pier Paolo Benigno world, without national currencies, we would have a decrease in social welfare.
Okay, I think it's enough. Pier Paolo, take a
So
no more than 10 minutes. Okay.
So the first on the conflict of interest, I can take 1 hour, but perhaps if it works in 9 months, you invite me, September, I explain you this project, big project.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's just I put some idea with some young guys which are developing it. So it's going to be quite revolutionary. Yeah. So this is something we can talk. Now, seigniorage. So who is going to get seigniorage? So where is seigniorage? In this system, seigniorage usually comes when you invest your security, so your reliability in some asset, right? So for example, Bitcoins doesn't have seigniorage, right? Per se, because it doesn't have a balance sheet, it doesn't have anything like that. So, but there is so for example, if I create a stable coin, I'm going to get some seigniorage, perhaps. And this is can be useful to remunerate people, right? Now, staking is just a way that they're doing to remunerate people, you know. So you basically lend in your wallet, your coins. They're using those coins, you know, perhaps to facilitate transaction, to do transaction, and you're rewarded for that. And this goes also to the value of money, in a sense. Those coins are used. Some of those coins are used to perform transaction on the chain. So there is a usage there. And so there is an intrinsic value. But I agree in one thing, in one important thing. So an unbacked currency, so a currency which doesn't have any back, can have zero value, okay? Dollar have two ways of backing, but one has to see whether they are reliable, I guess so. One is the investing asset. So Bitcoin doesn't invest anything, you just issue things, so it's just liability. So dollar, the investing asset. So the debts is a way to provide a backing to a currency, okay? Historically, it was the gold, right, to provide a backing to the currency. The other way is the government. So if you don't, how you back the currencies through taxes at the end of the day. So that's give us some of advantage of standard system in the kind of backing. But theoretically, the only equilibrium you eliminate is the zero value equilibrium. I don't believe that's the reason why there is so much volatility, is because of zero value equilibrium. Because at the end of the day, the price of Bitcoin has gone from zero to $20,000, right? So, you know, there is value there, right? So it can go to zero. Yeah, it can go to zero, but yeah.
You should clean for the illegal transaction, which we don't know, of course. So we don't know exactly, you know, if you avoid all the illegal transaction, what would be the value of Bitcoin? I have no idea.
Yeah, no idea, but again, if you look at fundamental, you have to think about money supply. So forget about the zero value equilibrium, which is there. But if I would say I have a currency which is in supply, and I believe that's a currency, and everyone believes that's important, and it seems the case, right? Because otherwise it would go to zero immediately. There are the fundamentals. So if the money is going to zero in growth rate and the other are going 10%, that's a 10% appreciation per year. So if I'm forward looking, I'm discounting that appreciation today, you can explain the high value. Obviously, this is going to stop at some point, right? So, but this is an important question. And important is also the issues of the gold standard, which is basically putting inflation to zero and is creating a period in which prices goes down, which is probably a bit dangerous for deflation when you have rigidity in wages, when you have all this stuff. So there are these macroeconomic issues that I believe are not in the picture I told you, and which are important. And which I think I see some benefits of the current central banking system, but who knows? Lots of energy, you know, in the production, in terms of the decentralization. It's true that they move from proof of work to proof of stake. And I think, you know, these are important. What I believe there is the current situation I wouldn't take as representative for the future. 10 years, things are going to change. So, you know, I would say, you know, people that say, oh, you consume energy like a little country, Netherlands, right? I would say, yeah, but that's the current state. In the future, things are going to improve. People are working on the technology. So I guess there are going to be improvements, but sure, on these things. And so in narrow banking, you know, your question at the end, narrow banking, credit rationing, yes, that's is going to produce, could necessarily produce less intermediation process and rationing. I'm not sure about reducing the social welfare, because once you have, I don't know, again, looking at Switzerland, is a country with low inflation and low intervention of the government in the economy, low public debt. And I guess then I see social welfare to be high, right? So it's not necessarily the issue that when the government intervenes a lot, then you have benefits for society. It depends. There are some areas where the government should intervene, and probably one has to imagine how it's going to be divided the world when we have this global currency, right? But I would suspect that some services are provided locally, like schools, things like that. So you need to think about this in a different way. Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
Paolo, really, thank you so much. This was super interesting and concludes brilliantly our day. I think longer than the World Cup final yesterday and more tiring, I guess. Thank you so much to everybody. Happy New Christmas, and see you soon with our events. Bye.